Did you ever walk into a room and feel the air change? A heaviness, a chill, like someone or something is watching you. You shake it off, blame it on the weather, the lighting, your mood. But deep down, something whispers it's not just your imagination. There are things we welcome into our homes without ever knowing the price. Not through words, not through actions, but through nature itself. Plants, innocent, beautiful, green, alive. We put them in corners for beauty, in kitchens for freshness, in bedrooms for peace. But some of them don't bring peace. They invite energy, and not the kind you want. You think I'm being dramatic. You think a little herb in a pot can't shift your life. That's exactly why it does. Because witchcraft never walks through the front door screaming. It creeps in quietly. It hides behind what you think is harmless. And it waits. Let's start with the one almost everyone has. Aloe vera. You think it's healing, a burn remedy, a skin saver. But what if I told you that ancient practitioners, those who studied dark magic long before science had words for it, used Aloe as a vessel to trap spiritual energy? It's been used to attract energy as much as repel it. When placed near windows or doors, Aloe can become a magnet, not for good, but for spirits trying to enter. Spirits seeking unresolved pain, hidden trauma, or emotional chaos. And if your home holds any of that, Aloe doesn't protect, it opens. Then there's lavender. You burn it. You bathe in it. You believe it soothes your soul. But here's the truth. It doesn't soothe everything. Lavender calms the conscious mind, yes. But it also awakens the subconscious. That part of you where your deepest fears, your worst memories, and generational trauma sleep. Lavender has been used in rituals to unlock inner demons, not heal them. And once those doors open, they don't always close. You ever walked past a pot of ivy and felt unsettled? There's a reason for that. Ivy isn't just a vine. It clings. It wraps. It invades. And in old folklore, it's known to be a channel for binding spells. The kind of energy that traps you in cycles. Of fear, of failure, of relationships that drain your soul. You think you're just tired. You think it's just life. But what if it's the ivy you water every morning that's holding on tighter than you realize? Then we have cactus. Sharp. Alone. Isolated. People say it wards off evil. But energy doesn't play by our rules. A cactus doesn't know the difference between protection and aggression. It only knows defense. And when placed in emotional environments, places where there's tension, resentment, unsaid words, it amplifies that. It doesn't calm the storm. It spikes it, and suddenly your home isn't peaceful. It's reactive, combative, and you can't explain why arguments come easy, why silence feels loud. That cactus doesn't just survive. It absorbs, stores, and reflects back exactly what you give it. Now let's talk about ferns. Lush, soft, quiet, but dangerous. Ferns are like spiritual antennas. They receive, constantly. They pick up on energy, moods, shadows. Yes, shadows, especially in darker corners of your home. Ever notice how ferns thrive in places the light doesn't quite reach? That's not just a plant thing. That's a pattern. And energy follows patterns, especially the kind that watches, that waits. Ferns are known in occult practices as the eyes of the house, not your eyes, and, finally, mint, refreshing, clean, inviting, but also, historically, used in spells of manipulation and seduction. Mint doesn't just freshen your space, it stimulates, it agitates, it speeds up everything. Your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. You start feeling restless, anxious, impatient. It draws energy to you fast, but without filtering it. And not all energy is good energy. Some of it wants to take. Some of it feeds off your frustration, your weakness, your chaos. Mint opens the door wide. No guard, no gatekeeper. So you think plants are just decoration. Think again. In the same way we can use herbs to heal, others can use them to harm. They can be tools, weapons, lures. Every object in your home carries energy. Every single thing you allow into your space either protects you or exposes you. You don't need to live in fear, but you do need to wake up. Your home is sacred. Your energy is sacred. Start paying attention to what you bring in. Not just the obvious things, the subtle ones, the soft ones, the ones that seem too gentle to hurt you, because that's exactly how darkness works. It wears beauty like a mask, and it waits until you stop noticing. If you've been feeling stuck, heavy, lost in your own space, don't just cleanse your energy, cleanse your environment, because what you allowing never leaves empty-handed. You see, the danger never announces itself with a warning. It doesn't kick down your door or scream in your face. It enters quietly, through the most ordinary things. And that's the terrifying part. Because while you're busy managing your career, your relationships, your next move, you're not looking at what's sitting silently in the corners of your own home. Witchcraft doesn't always need rituals or candles or chanting under a full moon. Sometimes, it just needs your permission. And you give it, not with your words, but with your ignorance. You bring things into your space because they're trending, because they look beautiful, because someone told you they're positive. But you don't stop to ask what energy they carry, what history they hold, or what force they attract. And nature, especially in the form of plants, is one of the most underestimated tools for spiritual manipulation. Why? Because it's natural, it's living, and it absorbs energy like a sponge. It listens when you cry. It holds the silence after an argument. It witnesses your weakest moments. And certain plants don't just observe that, they store it. They interact with it. They respond to it. This isn't folklore. This is the reality people don't want to accept because it sounds too mystical. But let me tell you something. Ancient cultures, elite intelligence agencies, and even psychological operations all share one truth. What you overlook becomes your blind spot. And the blind spot is always where the danger hides. So when you dismiss nature as harmless, when you call it decorative, when you assume everything green is good, you hand over your peace to something you never bothered to understand. That's how it starts. That's how it always starts. Not with a curse, but with a plant you thought was just a plant. Take Aloe Vera, for example. You've seen it everywhere. On skincare labels, in wellness shops, sitting pretty on someone's windowsill like a natural little miracle. You've been told it's healing, that it's the plant of regeneration, that it soothes burns and restores balance, and yes, physically, it does. But energetically, that's a whole different game. What you're not being told is that Aloe Vera has been used for centuries as a conduit, not just for healing, but for spiritual access. In ancient spiritual practices, Aloe wasn't just planted for its medical benefits. It was placed at entry points to act like a spiritual antenna, a receiver, a beacon. You think it's keeping bad energy out, but if your home is already full of emotional wounds, unresolved trauma, or chaotic vibrations, Aloe doesn't repel the darkness. It welcomes it, because plants don't operate on your intentions. They operate on your environment. They respond to the truth of your space, not the image you try to portray. If your energy is unbalanced, if there's pain in your home that's never been addressed, Aloe becomes a magnet, not a shield. And what it draws in isn't just random negativity. It's specific. It's attracted to pain, to emotional unrest, to unresolved cycles that are ripe for spiritual interference. You think you're nurturing the plant. But what if it's nurturing the very force that's been feeding off your vulnerability? That's the thing about witchcraft. It doesn't need a ritual to work. It just needs the right conditions. It needs an access point. And sometimes, that point is green, sits quietly in a pot, and waits for you to underestimate it. That's how it gets in. That's how it stays. Hidden, subtle. Surrounded by your blind trust. And all the while, you wonder why your energy feels heavy. Why your peace feels fragile. Why your space never truly feels safe. Start looking closer. Because not every healer wears a white coat. And not every plant is here to help you. And then there's lavender, the darling of essential oils. The scent of calm. People place it in bedrooms, bathtubs, closets, everywhere, thinking it'll bring them peace, help them sleep, wash away anxiety. But here's what most people never considering: lavender doesn't just quiet the mind. It opens it. That's why it works so well in relaxation and dream work. Because it pulls you inward. But what do you think happens when you start going deeper, and you're not prepared for what's waiting beneath the surface? You see, lavender doesn't know how to filter. It doesn't just unlock your peace. It can unlock your past. All of it. The memories you've buried, the emotions you've numbed, the pain you never gave a voice to. In spiritual traditions, lavender has been used not just for tranquility, but for access. It's a gateway. A tool in rituals meant to stir the subconscious and activate psychic awareness. That sounds beautiful, until you realize that the subconscious is where the darkness hides too. The shame, the generational wounds, the trauma you inherited but never questioned. Lavender doesn't discriminate. It opens the door to all of it, And once that door is open, if your space isn't protected, if your mind isn't strong, your emotions grounded, that calmness you were craving turns into emotional turbulence. You think you're becoming more sensitive, more intuitive, but what you're actually doing is exposing yourself to spiritual vulnerability. That's when the energy around you starts shifting. You become more reactive, more emotional, dreams become intense. The air in your home feels heavier, but you can't explain it, and it started with a scent, a soft, purple plant you thought was harmless. This is how it works. The world tells you lavender is peace in a pot, but peace without awareness is just permission. Permission for anything, anyone, to walk through the doors of your mind. So while you're burning it to relax, make sure you're not also inviting what you're not ready to face. Because once lavender opens something inside you, it doesn't always close it back up. Then there's ivy, the plant people think is poetic, romantic, even charming as it crawls up walls and wraps around everything in sight. But take a step back and look closer. Ivy doesn't just grow, it clings, it binds, it wraps itself so tightly around structures, around trees, around whatever it touches, that it suffocates the very thing it leans on. That's not decoration. That's domination. And when you bring ivy into your home, you're not just inviting in greenery, you're inviting a symbol of spiritual entanglement. In folklore and ancient rituals, ivy was never just a background plant. It was a tool, a symbol of attachment spells, emotional bondage, cycles that don't break, energy that doesn't leave. You think it looks elegant, but that elegance hides a deeper truthing ivy holds on, and it doesn't let go easily. You may not even notice it at first, but suddenly you feel stuck. Your thoughts loop. You keep replaying the same arguments, the same regrets, the same pain. Relationships that no longer serve you feel impossible to leave. Patterns repeat like clockwork. And all the while, ivy sits quietly, feeding off the energy it helps trap. It's not a coincidence. Plants are mirrors, and ivy reflects the state of spiritual and emotional attachment in your life. It connects itself to surfaces the same way emotional trauma connects itself to memory. It wins through your inner structure until it becomes part of you. And when ivy's in your home, it becomes part of your space's energy. You may have walked into that room feeling clear. After time, you walk out feeling heavy, drained, confused, but you can't quite explain why. That's because ivy doesn't announce its grip. It just tightens slowly, inch by inch, until the light inside you struggles to breathe. This is why awareness matters. Because not everything green is life-giving. Some things grow by taking from everything around them. Some things mask spiritual weight in visual beauty. Ivy doesn't need to speak. It just needs space. And once it has that, it stays. Not because you want it to, but because you never realized what it was really doing. And then there's the cactus. Sharp, isolated, alone. People love it because it doesn't demand much. Just a little light, a little space, and no fuss. It gives the illusion of strength, of resilience, of protection. People place it on their desks, their windowsills, their bedroom nightstands, thinking, this plant is a shield. But let me tell you something real. Cactus doesn't know how to protect you. It only knows how to defend itself. And when you bring that kind of energy into your home, especially into emotionally volatile spaces, you're not setting up a wall against negativity. You're amplifying it. You think the spikes are keeping bad energy out. In truth, those spikes are tuning forks for tension. Cactus is not passive. It holds a frequency of survival, of aggression. It's built to thrive in harsh environments, which means it adapts to chaos. It's attuned to scarcity, to heat, to isolation. So what do you think it does when it's dropped into your living room after a week of stress, silence, and unresolved fights? It holds that tension. It reflects that survival mode. It magnifies whatever frequency is already bouncing around your space. You walk past it and you don't feel peace. You feel alert, on edge, aware of something you can't explain. That's not intuition. That's an energetic warning. In many spiritual systems, cactus is used in environments that require barriers, not healing, and there's a big difference. A barrier can keep things out, but it can also keep things in. Your anger, guilt, your bitterness. Cactus doesn't filter what energy it reflects. It just responds. And if you're not paying attention, you'll mistake stagnation for strength. You'll convince yourself that the quiet in your home means stability, when really, it's just emotional buildup pressed down and waiting to erupt. Cactus doesn't cleanse your space. It survives in it. That's a crucial distinction. Because survival is not healing. Survival is tension in disguise. Ever wonder why certain rooms feel sharp, even though everything looks perfectly arranged? Why certain corners feel like they're pushing you out? Why conversations near a cactus plant spiral faster into conflict or cold silence? That's the energy echoing back. That's not in your head. That's feedback. And if you keep ignoring it, if you keep telling yourself it's just a plant, you're missing the whole point. Because everything in your space is a reflection of something in you. Cactus reminds you of the walls you've built to keep yourself safe, and how sometimes those same walls become the very reason you can't breathe. It's not about fear. It's about honesty. Cactus teaches you where you're still guarding old wounds, where you're still bracing for impact, where you've mistaken numbness for peace. You want to grow. Then don't surround yourself with things that have mastered the art of emotional self-protection. Surround yourself with things that know how to receive, how to release, how to transform. Cactus doesn't do any of that. It holds, it stores, and the longer it sits in your space, the more it reinforces the belief that letting go isn't safe. You want to protect your home? Then don't just throw spikes in a pot and call it strength. Protection is not about bracing against the world. It's about creating a space where healing can happen, where vulnerability isn't punished, where energy flows, not freezes, where nothing sharp waits in the corner, reminding your spirit every day that danger might still be coming. So ask yourself, are you decorating with strength? Or are you decorating with fear disguised as strength? Are you choosing plants because they help you breathe, or because they help you hide? The cactus won't answer you, but your energy will. Your peace will. The tension in your home will. You just have to listen. And think there's the fern. Quiet, soft, almost unnoticeable. It doesn't have the spikes of a cactus or the fragrant distraction of lavender. It just sits there, green and still, like it's minding its own business. But don't let the silence fool you. Because fern doesn't just sit in your space. It watches it. It absorbs. It collects. It listens. In ancient practices, ferns weren't just seen as pretty foliage. They were considered spiritual antennas, tools for sensing energy, detecting movement in the unseen, picking up on the whispers between worlds. The kind of plant you didn't just place in a room. You positioned it with intention, or risked consequences you couldn't explain. Ferns thrive in the dark. They love corners. They grow where sunlight barely reaches. And energetically, that's not just a preference. It's a pattern. Because the same way they seek physical shadows, they also become comfortable with spiritual ones. You think you're placing something natural and cleansing in your space, but you're placing something that doesn't fear the dark. Something that lives in it. Something that may be too comfortable soaking up the energy you've been avoiding. Ever walk past a fern and feel like the room is heavier, like something just brushed past your shoulder? Ever glance at it and feel like its presence is to wear? That's not your imagination, because fern doesn't just receive energy. It stores it, especially the kind you ignore, the grief you didn't process, the arguments that echoed through the walls and never got resolution, the fear that sat in your chest at night while you pretended everything was fine. Fern doesn't judge, it just remembers, and it holds that memory in the silence. This is why in some ancient protection rituals, ferns were kept away from sleeping spaces, not because they're evil, but because they're open. Too open, they don't know how to shut off. They absorb energy constantly, yours, your family's, even that of guests walking through your door. And if your space isn't regularly cleansed, if you're not mindful of the emotional residue in your home, that fern becomes a spiritual archive, a keeper of energy you thought you left behind. But you didn't. You just let a plant collect it for you. The problem: energy doesn't like to stay buried, especially not emotional energy. It builds. It wants release. And if that release doesn't come through healing, it comes through pressure. It seeps into your sleep, your dreams, your thoughts. You start feeling drained, your creativity stalls, your motivation drops, and you can't explain it. Because everything in your life looks normal. But your environment is speaking a language you stopped listening to. The fern's been speaking it all along. You see, this is what no one tells you. Not all stillness is peace. Sometimes stillness is surveillance. Sometimes it's buildup. Sometimes it's a quiet warning waiting to be heard. So when you place that fern in the darkest corner of your room, ask yourself, what else are you keeping in the dark? What else is growing in silence? Because the truth is, a spiritual energy doesn't care how aesthetically pleasing your home is. It responds to the invisible, the unspoken, the forgotten. And some plants, like the fern, don't just sit in your space. They reflect it back to you. Every shadow, every secret, every silent storm you've been trying to suppress. And if you're not ready to face that, then don't be surprised when you start to feel like your home no longer belongs to you. Because energy always finds a place to live. And sometimes, it chooses the one thing you never suspected the plant you thought was just part of the decor. And now let's talk about mint. Crisp, refreshing, bright. It's the plant people use when they want to clear the air, energize the space, uplift the mood. You put it in teas, in essential oils, in diffusers. You even crush it between your fingers just to smell that clean, sharp scent that makes everything feel new. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. Because unlike the other plants that slip into the shadows, mint charges straight into your space like it owns the room. And most people welcome it with open arms. But here's what they don't understand. Mint doesn't just stimulate your senses. It agitates your energy. Mint is fast. It's sharp. It's aggressive in how it moves through a room. It doesn't settle, it stirs. It doesn't calm, it accelerates. That's why it's been used in magical practices for centuries. Not just to freshen energy, but to draw it in. Quickly, without filter. That means if you're trying to create peace, balance, or protection, and your space is full of emotional clutter, mental fog, or unresolved issues, mint doesn't push that chaos away. It throws a spotlight on it and turns up the volume. Everything speeds up. Your thoughts race, your emotions react faster. You find yourself irritated, impulsive, restless, and you can't understand why. People think mint is harmless because it's associated with clarity. But clarity without grounding is chaos. It's a flood of information, emotion, sensation. Mint doesn't discriminate. It doesn't ask whether the energy it's pulling in is good or toxic. It just opens the door and says, come on in. And if you haven't built strong spiritual boundaries, if your home isn't protected, then mint becomes the host, not the healer, not the protector, the host for whatever energy moves the fastest. And let me tell you, dark energy moves fast when it senses instability. Have you ever noticed how people who burn mint or keep it growing near their workspaces sometimes feel more stressed instead of less? More wired than productive. Like something's always pressing against their chest, pushing them forward, making them grind, but never letting them rest. That's the energetic effect of mint when it's unchecked. It opens the channel, but it doesn't teach you how to control the current. And when you're constantly exposed to energy you're not equipped to manage, you don't just feel tired, you feel invaded. In ancient spells, mint was often used in rituals of seduction, manipulation, even mind control. Not because of its scent, but because of its force. It takes over the senses. It influences the mind. It shifts perception. And in the wrong environment, it doesn't liberate you. It makes you reactive. It keeps you locked in a pattern of motion without reflection. And motion without direction is the fastest way to spiritual burnout. This is where self-awareness has to step in. Because when you place a mint plant in your home, what you're really doing is inviting stimulation into your space. Are you ready for that? Can your emotional state handle more movement, more energy, more spiritual noise? Because if you're trying to quiet your mind, to heal your spirit, to process something deep, mint may be working against you, not for you. Not everything that smells clean is cleansing. Not everything that feels sharp is clarity. Mint is a power plant, and power in the wrong hands, or in the wrong energy, isn't helpful, it's dangerous. So don't just follow trends. Don't just trust what people say is uplifting. Trust what your space actually needs. Because sometimes, what you call energy is really agitation. What you call freshness is really exposure. And what you welcome in as peace is actually the very thing disturbing it. There's something people never pay attention to: the corners, the places no one looks, the spots in your home where light doesn't reach, where air barely flows, where dust collects and silence settles like a second skin. You think nothing of them. You vacuum around them. You light a candle and pretend they're just part of the architecture. But energy doesn't ignore corners. In fact, that's exactly where it hides. That's where it waits. That's where it grows when no one is watching. Darkness is not just the absence of light. It's the absence of awareness. And in your home, any space left without attention becomes a holding cell for everything you refuse to deal with, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. The grief you won't speak about, it goes there. The fight you never resolved, it lingers there. The fear you're too strong to admit, it roots itself there like a parasite. These overlooked corners become storage units for suppressed energy. And when you add plants into those same spots, especially the kinds that absorb, you're not cleansing the space, you're compounding it. Because those plants, as innocent as they seem, become spiritual partners in silence. They don't just sit there and do nothing. They receive. They soak up the energy around them and hold it like a mirror you refuse to look into. You ever walk into a room and feel a chill in the air, even when it's warm? You ever feel like a space is too still, too quiet, like something's holding its breath? That's not your imagination. That's accumulated energy waiting to be noticed, waiting for movement, waiting for release. This is how spiritual stagnation begins. Not in chaos, not in conflict, but in neglect, and neglect always breeds vulnerability. Those forgotten spaces become spiritual weak points, places where outside energy can creep in, where internal pain can settle, where clarity and peace go to die. And when that happens, you start noticing things. You're more irritable. Your sleep becomes shallow. You feel disconnected from your own space. Your home doesn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It feels like it's watching you. And it is. Because what you ignore doesn't disappear. It waits. And it learns how to take up space without ever making a sound. Energy has memory. And if you're not the one directing it, it will find places to live on its own. That's why people sage their homes and still feel heavy. That's why they rearrange furniture, redecorate, repaint, yet still feel stuck. Because they're changing the surface, not clearing the residue. They're ignoring the corners. And the corners are where everything begins. So the next time you walk into your own home, don't just look where the light falls. Look where it doesn't. Look in the corners you haven't acknowledged in months. Ask yourself what energy lives there. What conversations never left that space? What memories are still echoing? Because that's where the work begins. Not in the spotlight, in the shadows, always in the shadows. Every plant in your home is an extension of you. Not your taste, not your decor. You, your state of mind, your emotional patterns, your spiritual posture. People think they choose plants just because they're beautiful or easy to care for. But the truth is, we choose what reflects us. And plants, whether you realize it or not, begin to echo what's happening inside of you. You're not just watering leaves, you're feeding mirrors. You're cultivating energy. And whatever you carry within, they absorb, they reflect, they magnify. Think about it. If you're anxious, if your spirit is cluttered, if your energy is constantly shifting from survival to shutdown, that plant doesn't stay neutral. It responds. You bring home a cactus when you're tired of being hurt. You keep mint in your kitchen because you're desperate to feel refreshed. You place lavender near your bed, not because it's trendy, but because part of you is silently pleading for peace. It's never random. Your intuition picks them, and your energy imprints on them. That's why two identical plants in two different homes don't grow the same way. One thrives, one withers. The difference isn't the soil, it's the spirit surrounding it. So if the plants in your home are struggling, if their leaves are dull, their stems drooping, their life force dimming, ask yourself what you're holding on to. Because most of the time, they're not dying from neglect. They're dying because they've absorbed too much of what you refuse to release. And if they're thriving wildly, growing fast, even aggressively, that might not always be a good thing either. That could be a sign that your energy is escalated. That something inside of you is pushing, forcing, spiraling. It looks like abundance on the outside, but it might actually be chaos looking for a place to land. This is where awareness shifts everything. When you realize that your plants aren't just growing in pots. They're growing in your energy, in your sadness, in your resilience, in your fear, in your hope. That realization hits different. You stop decorating and start listening. You stop copying what looks good on someone else's Pinterest board and start asking yourself, what do I really need? Because maybe you don't need another trailing vine to fill that empty corner. Maybe you need to sit in that emptiness and figure out what's been echoing there for years. The plants will tell you, they always do. They reflect your habits, your silence, your survival mechanisms, your attempts to heal. And if you look at them honestly, without distraction, they'll show you exactly what your energy's been doing. Not what you say it's doing, but what it's actually doing. That's where the truth lies. Not in the words, in the roots, in the patterns, in the way life either blooms or begins to close itself off. So no, it's not just a plant. It's a mirror. And every time you walk past it, it's giving you feedback. The only question is, are you paying attention? Or are you so focused on the aesthetics that you've missed the emotional truth right in front of you? Green, living, silent, but never passive. Because the energy you pour into your space doesn't disappear. It grows, and it grows into exactly what you've been avoiding. Awareness is your first defense. It always has been. Because the most dangerous kind of vulnerability is the one you're not aware you have. It's not the big, dramatic cracks in your life that let things in. It's the tiny ones you've stopped noticing. The casual habits. The small choices. The things you bring into your home without thought, assuming they're harmless because they look beautiful or feel trendy, or someone else swore by them. But what you allow into your space, into your environment, shapes your energy more than you realize. That's not superstition. That's physics. That's emotional reality. That's how energy works. You don't need to be a witch to work with energy. You don't need to light a candle or say a chant. All you need to do is open the door without knowing what's walking through it. Every item, every scent, every plant you place around you either protects you or exposes you. Truth, that's the line. That's the truth. And the only way you know which one it's doing is if you're aware of it. If you're present. If you stop telling yourself it's just decor, and start recognizing that nothing in your home is neutral. Not if you're emotionally connected to it. Not if your energy touches it every single day. It's not about living in fear. Fear paralyzes. This isn't about paranoia. This is about ownership. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't live life by default. Who doesn't just decorate their life, they design it. With purpose. With eyes open. With a clear understanding that what you don't question has power over you. You want to take your power back. Then start questioning everything. Why is this here? What does it represent? How do I feel when I'm near it? What happens to my thoughts, my body, my mood when this object, this plant, this energy is in the room? Because once you start paying attention like that, everything changes. You stop chasing peace outside yourself and start building it inside your space. You stop letting random energy crash through your door and start becoming the gatekeeper of your own sanctuary. That's what awareness gives you. Not control over the world, but authority over your world. And the difference between those two is everything. You don't need to wait for chaos to show up to start protecting your peace. You don't need to feel attacked before you become intentional. You need to decide right now that your space matters, that your energy is sacred, that your home is not a place for things to just exist. It's a place for your spirit to be safe. And that begins the moment you stop saying, "It's just a plant," and start asking, "What is this bringing into my life?" Because energy is always moving, always listening, always building momentum. The question is, are you the one directing it, or are you letting it shape you without even realizing it? That's where power begins, not in control, but in clarity. And clarity only comes to those who are awake. Not once, not sometimes, but every single day. So now you know, it was never just about the plants. It was never just about what sits quietly in the corner or what looks good on a shelf. It's about what you allow into your space without understanding the weight it carries. Every object in your home, every scent in the air, every root in the soil holds a vibration, a message, a memory. And while you're busy living, surviving, rushing through your routine, those things are silently shaping your energy, your peace, your protection. Witchcraft doesn't always wear black robes or chant in the dark. Sometimes it shows up in daylight, in beauty, in nature, in what you never thought to question. And if you've ever felt your spirit uneasy in your own home, if you've felt your peace slipping without a reason, if you've sensed something watching, something stirring, something not right, Listen to it, trust it, because your energy never lies, but it will reflect what you've allowed it to absorb. Take your power back by becoming aware. Don't live surrounded by blind choices. Don't decorate your soul with distractions. Cleanse your space. Protect your energy. Guard your home. And remember, what you bring in will either lift you or haunt you. The choice is yours.